حي على الفلاح.
Often called the cradle of civilization, Iraq was home to ancient Mesopotamian peoples who developed the world's first writing, agriculture, and cities. Between 10,000 and 3000 BCE, Iraq has a rich and complex history. Known inhabitants date back to the Chalcolithic Stone Age. Iraq was conquered and inhabited by numerous empires, including the Sumerians, Assyrians, Babylonian, Seleucid, and Parthian. The biblical sites of Babylon, Nimrud, and Nineveh are located in modern Iraq. Iraq plays a rich and vital contribution to religious history, and after Palestine, Iraq has the most religious history of any other country in the world. The Prophet Ibrahim was from Ur. Prophet Daniel lived in Iraq most of his life. The Prophet Ezekiel was from southern Iraq, and his shrine is located there. Shrine of the Prophet Yunus can be found in Nineveh. The two angels, Harut and Marut, mentioned in the Quran, are said to have been located in Babylon. The city is also famous for the construction of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a wonder of the ancient world that some people believe was built by the biblical king Nebuchadnezzar II. The ancient scientists who lived in Babylon made important discoveries in mathematics, physics, and astronomy. Among their many accomplishments, they developed trigonometry, used mathematical models to track Jupiter, and developed methods of tracking time that are still used today. They built the first city in the world. They had the longest empires till that point. The influential cuneiform script was invented in Mesopotamia. They enacted the earliest known comprehensive legal code. They developed first ever positional number system. They could perform advanced arithmetic. They developed the basis form of Western astronomy. They are credited with the invention of wheel and chariot, and most importantly, the impressive work of art and architecture. In the 7th century, the Sassanid Empire was conquered by the Rashidun Caliphate, with Iraq specifically falling under Islamic rule following the Battle of al-Qadisiyyah in 636 and the advent of Islam in Iraq. The Sumerians were the very first people to settle into Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, around 4800 BC, marking the emergence of the first human civilization. Mesopotamians are noted for developing one of the first written scripts around 3000 BCE. Mesopotamians used writing to record sales and purchases, to write letters to one another, and to tell stories. The incredibly important invention of the wheel is also credited to the Sumerians. Sumerians built ships that allowed them to travel into the Persian Gulf and trade with other early civilizations, such as the Harappans in northern India. They traded textiles, leather goods, and jewelry for Harappan semi-precious stones, copper, pearls, and ivory. Sumerian religion was polytheistic, or worshipped multiple gods, many of which were anthropomorphic. They took human-like form. Temples to these gods were constructed atop massive ziggurats, which were in the centers of most cities. These structures would have taken thousands of people many years to construct. Sargon of Akkad conquered most of Sumerian city-states, thus ending Sumer with the rise of the Akkadian Empire. The Akkadian Empire took over the lands of the Sumerians through military conquests in 2234 BCE. The Akkadian Empire had a centralized government and was composed of a large multicultural population. Commerce in the region grew enormously under the Akkadians. The Mesopotamian architecture greatly improved. The Empire of Akkad collapsed in 2154 BCE within 180 years of its founding. In 1894 BC, the Babylonian Empire came to power in the region. The most revered king of the Babylonians was King Hammurabi. who greatly expanded the Babylonian Empire and created one of the world's first legal codes. King Hammurabi's code was unique because it codified law across the empire so that every citizen was expected to adhere to the same law system. The code was written on stone, steel slabs, and clay tablets. Its most famous phrase was an eye for an eye, representing the Babylonian sense of justice. In 1365 BC, the Assyrian Empire expanded into the area. The Assyrians were known for their mastery in battle and their penchant for city building, such as Nineveh and Kalach, and by the 9th century BC grew to control Mesopotamia and substantial territory in the greater region. During the time of the Assyrian Empire, the world's first library was built in modern-day Iraq. In 626 BC, Nabopolassar, the king of Babylonia, threw off Assyrian rule and named Babylon the capital of the empire. With the recovery of Babylonian independence under King Nabopolassar, a new era of architecture activity ensued, and Babylon was made into one of the wonders of the ancient world with the construction of the Hanging Gardens, the Gate of Ishtar, and the Tower of Babylon. His son Nebuchadnezzar increased Babylonian territory and sacked Jerusalem. The Babylonians are defeated by Cyrus the Great of the Achaemenid Empire in 539 BC, and Mesopotamia would later become subject to subsequent conquests by Alexander the Great in 331 BC. The Romans under Trajan, the Parthian Empire in the 3rd century BC, and the Sassanid dynasty in the 3rd through 7th centuries AD. The power that toppled the Sassanids came from an unexpected source. The Persians knew that the Arabs, a tribally oriented people, had never been organized under the rule of a single power and were at a primitive level of military development. Events in Arabia changed rapidly and dramatically in the 6th century AD when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, a member of the Hashemite clan of the powerful Quraysh tribe of Mecca, claimed prophethood and began gathering adherents for the monotheistic faith of Islam that had been revealed to him. The conversion of Arabia proved to be the most difficult of the Islamic conquests because of the entrenched tribalism. Within 1 year of Muhammad's death in 632, however, Arabia was secure enough for the Prophet's successor, Abu Bakr radiallahu an, the first caliph and the father-in-law of Muhammad, to begin the campaign against the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire. The first organized conflict between the Muslims and occupying Persian forces in Mesopotamia seems to have been in 634, when the Arabs were defeated at the Battle of the Bridge. There was a force of some 5,000 Muslims under Abu Ubaid al-Thaqafi radiallahu an, which was routed by the Persians. This was followed by Khalid ibn al-Walid's radiallahu an successful campaign, which saw all of Iraq come under Muslim rule within a year, with the exception of the Persian Empire's capital, Ctesiphon. Around 636, a larger Arab Muslim force under Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu an defeated the main Persian army at the Battle of al-Qadisiyyah and moved on to capture the Persian capital of Ctesiphon. By the end of 638, the Muslims had conquered all of the western Sassanid provinces, including modern Iraq, and the last Sassanid emperor, Yazdegerd III, had fled to the central and the northern Persia, where he was slain in 651. Most of the Iraqi tribes were Christian at the time of the Muslim conquests. They decided to pay the jizya, the tax required for non-Muslims living in Muslim-ruled areas, and were not further disturbed. The Islamic conquest was made easier because both the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire were culturally and socially bankrupt. Thus, the native populations had little to lose by cooperating with the conquering power. Because the Muslim warriors were fighting a holy war, they were regulated by religious law that strictly prohibited them from harming women, children, religious leaders, or anyone who had not actually engaged in warfare. Further, the Muslim warriors had come to conquer and settle a land under Islamic law. It was not in their economic interest to destroy or pillage unnecessarily and indiscriminately. Under Umar radiallahu anh, he ordered the founding of 2 garrisoned cities to protect the newly conquered territory. Kufa, named as the capital of Iraq, and Basra, which was also to be a port. Umar also organized the administration of the conquered Persian lands. Umar continued the Sassanid office of the Divan, essentially an institution to control income and expenditure through record keeping and the centralization of administration. The Divan would be used henceforth throughout the lands of the Islamic conquests. Dehqans, minor revenue collection officials under the Sassanids, retained their function of assessing and collecting taxes. Tax collectors in Iraq had never enjoyed universal popularity, but the Arabs found them particularly noxious. Arabic replaced Persian as the official language, and it slowly filtered into common usage. Iraqis intermarried with Arabs and converted to Islam. By 650, Muslim armies had reached the Amu-Darya, Oxus River, and had conquered all the Sassanid domains. The city of Baghdad was built in the 8th century and became the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate. Baghdad soon became the primary cultural center of the Muslim world during the centuries of the incipient Islamic Golden Age of the 8th to 9th centuries. Muslims learned how to make paper from the Chinese and proceeded to transform this art into a major industry. By 793 CE, there were many paper mills in Baghdad. This was a revolutionary development because the existing alternatives to paper were papyrus, which was fragile, and parchment, which was expensive. Paper, on the other hand, was relatively cheap. This mass availability of paper enabled Muslims to commit vast amounts of translations and original research to paper. As a result, libraries and bookstores became a common sight in Baghdad and soon spread to other Muslim cities. By the 13th century, Baghdad had 36 libraries. We hear of a private library in Baghdad as early as the 9th century that required 120 camels to move it from one place to another. Another scholar of Baghdad refused to accept a position elsewhere because it would take 400 camels to transport his books. The catalog of this private library filled 10 volumes. This is the more astonishing when it is realized that the library of the King of France in 1300 had only about 400 titles. Writes Arts in his book, The Mind of the Middle Ages. In addition to libraries and bookshops, the Muslims of Baghdad established an academy devoted to research and intellectual enhancement, followed by an institution which is widely acknowledged as the precursor to the modern university and the very first hospital. Caliph Harun al-Rashid is credited with expanding the glory of Baghdad to its greatest height during his reign from 786 to 809 CE. He created an intellectual ambience by encouraging mathematicians, astronomers, scientists, and philosophers. His son, Caliph al-Ma'mun, went a step further by establishing the House of Wisdom in an academic institute devoted to translations, research, and education. It quickly became one of the most famous centers of learning, attracting scholars from all over the world, from many cultures and religions. Here, teachers and students worked together to translate Greek, Persian, Syriac, and Indian manuscripts. They studied the works of Aristotle, Plato, Hippocrates, Euclid, Ptolemy, Pythagoras, Brahmagupta, and many others. Then, they began building on and testing the knowledge of the greatest ancient scholars, resulting in the development of the scientific method of observation and experimentation. Instruction at the House of Wisdom included rhetoric logic, metaphysics, theology, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, physics, biology, medicine, and surgery, as documented by arts. The House of Wisdom also housed an observatory which facilitated astronomical advancements, leading to refinements of such scientific tools as the astrolabe. Scholars also extended the known bounds of existing fields of study, introducing chemistry, algebra, and launching trigonometry as a proper branch of mathematics. For centuries, the fall of Rome, Western Europe was a benighted backwater, a world of subsistence farming, minimal literacy, and violent conflict. Meanwhile, Arab culture was thriving, dazzling those Europeans fortunate enough to visit cities like Baghdad or Antioch. There, philosophers, mathematicians, and astronomers were steadily advancing the frontiers of knowledge, as well as keeping alive the works of Plato and Aristotle. When the best libraries in Europe held several dozen books, Baghdad's great library, the House of Wisdom, housed 400,000. Jonathan Lyons shows just how much Western ideas owe to the golden age of Arab civilization. In 1258, Mongols, led by Hulagu Khan, captured the region, and Baghdad was sacked, destroying the House of Wisdom, the leading library in the leading intellectual center of the Arab world. The House of Wisdom contained countless precious documents accumulated over 500 years. Survivors said so many books were thrown into the river that the waters of the Tigris ran black with ink. Others said the waters were red from blood. In 1 week, libraries and their treasures that had been accumulated over hundreds of years were burned or otherwise destroyed. So many books were thrown into the Tigris River. According to one writer, that they formed a bridge that would support a man on horseback. After years of Mongol and Mamluk rule, the region fell under the power of the Ottoman Empire in the 16th century. Today, Iraq is one of the most culturally diverse nations in the Middle East. Arabs, Kurds, Turkmen, Assyrians, Mandaeans, and Armenians, among others, speak their own languages and retain their cultural and religious identities. With a population of over 46 million, it is the 31st most populous country. The country is overwhelmingly Muslim, who are split into two distinct sects, Shia and Sunni. Approximately 95% to 98% of the population are Muslims, with Shia Muslims constituting around 55% and Sunnis around 40%. The remainder follow Christianity, Yazidism, Mandaeism, and Yarsanism.